Future Warrior, The Mars Campaign. Chapter 9. General De Veers walked out of spacious meeting room on the bridge of the United Earth Fleet. UEF, flagship the United Earth Ship, UES, Genesis. The briefing of the High Council would not recommence until after the politicians had eaten their lunch. De Veers was glad for the interruption. He had far more important and pressing duties he needed to attend to. He had entertained the idea of sending one of his officers or his adjutant to undertake the briefing in his stead. But in the event, he had decided to do it himself. The chance to observe the High Council members and their reactions to the latest news a useful one. As he exited the doors, De Veers noticed a figure in the corner of his vision, waiting in the passageway. Without looking up from the document he was reading, the latest intelligence findings from Pathfinder units in the field in Tharsis. De Veers waved the figure over. "We have a serious problem, General." De Veers kept reading the document, answering without looking up. "You're probably too young to know this, but the League always has a serious problem. Get to the point." The youthful intelligence branch officer looked around to make sure no one could overhear before replying. "We have found the source of the breach," where De Veers replied evenly. The information was accessed from an unauthorized usage of the Milnet. The intelligence branch officer paused, but De Veers continued to read the document in his hand without making comment. "The breach originated on board this vessel from a data hub. We have questioned the guard on duty at the time, but it doesn't look like he will be much help. All he could tell us was that someone wearing a naval officer's uniform accessed the terminal." For the first time, De Veers looked up, his eyes piercing the man in front of him. "Lazarus is on the Genesis? How certain are you of this?" "The profile fits, General. He even signed Lazarus in the hub's log book," the officer replied scornfully. "How did he get the information off the ship?" De Veers asked, his voice stony. "We're not sure, sir. We're checking onboard communications systems logs. Assuming he doesn't have a covert signals device, it's likely he hacked in and sent a signal to the surface." The slight crease of a frown crossed De Veers' face. "I want full containment protocols. Seal the ship. No one to come aboard or leave without my authorization. No one clear?" The officer nodded. "Yes, General." De Veers ignored the officer as he hurried away, feeling a sense of unease behind his expressionless exterior. He had seen many traitors in his day. Some were motivated by money, some by power, some by ego, but this one felt different. He was bold, technically proficient, and appeared able to manipulate people at will. A truly dangerous combination. "Do you want me to take charge of the search personally?" De Veers glanced sideways at his adjutant. The man was a talented and capable officer. He was also De Veers' only son. De Veers could see the glint of eagerness of the hunt in his son's eyes, like a lion with the scent of prey on the wind. He also saw a mirror image of himself in the handsome young man, an image a decade long past. All passion and fire. De Veers nadif. His son hurrying away like a wolf slipped of the chain, eagerness showing in every step. Stalker found he was starting to enjoy the role of training officer. All of the new Terra Nova recruits had now been issued with their full kit of assault equipment, and worked hard to quickly become proficient in its use. In all, the Terra Nova had recruited 120 new members at FOB Warlock, and his Stalker things were definitely looking up. D and the other senior Terra Nova trainers at the base organized for the new Terra Nova men to train as an understrength company, and with some help from the Excalibur Division's recruits gave them some worthy opponents. The sight of the Midnight Black Terra Nova troops engaging in mock battles with the Excalibur assault troops was a sight to behold. The Excalibur Division was another of the 10 and wore the same EEA suits as the Terra Nova, but there the similarities ended. Their EEA suits were colored bone white with a large red crucifix superimposed on the front and back. They also had a different pattern EEA helmet that had wing-like sensor attachments on either side, the effect making it look like a medieval knight's helm. Their impulse rifles were also different, being colored bright silver, unlike the black weapons carried by the Terra Nova. The Excalibur Division were proud of their history and of their motto of "Defend the Weak." To say that a unit of fully equipped Excalibur troops were an imposing sight was an understatement. The initial recruit training at Cydonia was winding to a close. All of the new members had taken their oaths of allegiance and would be shortly shipping off to the Terra Nova's base of operations at FOB Phoenix near Tharsis for the rest of their induction with the division's 10th Regiment. The imminent departure of the recruits had seen Stalker and D switch back to training green formations that arrived at the base until the Terra Nova was brought back to active status. Fate, though, had other ideas. 500 kilometers to the east of FOB Warlock, the newly landed 63rd Mechanized Infantry Division was going through practice maneuver. The commander of Serpent 6 was starting to lose his temper. His command, a Prowler reconnaissance vehicle, was one of several scouting ahead of the main divisional elements looking for the imaginary enemy, and it had been a boring night. He wiped his brow again. He really had to get the damned climate control fixed in his Prowler. After all, how was he supposed to vanquish the Reds while sweating his arse off? It had already been a bad night. The TACnet was on the fritz, and he had lost contact with everyone. His Prowler was approaching a small crest in the seemingly endless tracts of fields when his night suddenly became significantly worse. Movement, Commander. What? What bloody movement? Be more specific. He chastised his gunner as he popped the turret hatch to try to let some of heat out. Well, bloody FNG. Fucking new guy. Excuse me, Commander. Are those our vehicles? What the hell are you talking about? There's no one else out here but us. He looked through his NVS sight but couldn't quite make out the shapes due to the distance. So he flicked it to the IR setting, and the display lit up showing hundreds, no thousands, of vehicles advancing in neat formations through the low valley spreading out before him. His throat felt dry, and he struggled for words. As he looked through his sights, he saw the low-flying shapes of gunships and the massive shapes of mechs moving amongst the formations. My God, sir, we have to get this out and warn TACCOM. The Reds are on the move. But, sir, won't they detect us if we transmit? We have no choice. They must be after the FOBs and the training facilities. They could be caught completely unprepared if they aren't warned. Without another thought, he hit the emergency high-powered burst transmission function on his comm system. With a high-energy micro burst, the footage from the Prowler's sights and their location were burnt through the jamming and transmitted to a command ship in orbit via a network of communication satellites. This is Serpent 6. I have enemy formations in sight. Grid reference 773 Zulu. I repeat, enemy formations in the open. I am engaging. The enemy reaction was almost instantaneous, with a pair of gunships breaking formation and heading in their direction. Full reverse, engage at will. The Prowler's engine screamed as it reversed back off the crest, its turret-mounted 6-barreled 20mm cannon raised up seeking targets. As the first gunship came over the rise, flying nap of the earth, it flew into a storm of 20mm fire and nosedived into the crop, the advanced attack aircraft going whirling to destruction. The second gunship peeled off, a line of tracer rounds chasing it from sight. With a crash, the reversing Prowler hit something and stopped. The commander spun around in the open hatch and looked behind him, straight at the legs of a massive mech, its outlines silhouetted against the starred sky. His mouth moved, but no words came out, and he couldn't hear the desperate calls for orders from his driver and gunner. With an explosion of bluish-purple flame, the red-painted mech incinerated the commander and everything in the Prowler through the open hatch. Stalker was jolted from sleep by the sound of the high-pitched general-purpose alarm. What the devil is going on? Not another drill. Stalker had come to hate the almost regular interruptions to his already limited sleep, as it made him less effective in his training. Getting into and powering up his EEA, Stalker picked up his combat load and rifle. Even drills have to be treated as the real thing after all, he thought, and stepped out of his billet. Stalker was confronted with a totally unexpected scene. Soldiers were rushing in every direction, many only partly dressed, and here and their officers were desperately trying to form ranks and organize the scattered men into fighting units. Stalker grabbed an infantry officer who was running past. "What the hell is going on, Lieutenant?" The man, lost for breath, took a moment to reply. "The Reds are coming. They ambushed and wiped out the 63rd Mechanized east of here, and now they're coming for us." Stalker let the grateful officer go and looked around, spotting Big D talking furiously on the TACnet surrounded by some of the newly recruited Terra Nova members and jogged over. It's no good, they will reach FOB Dingo within the hour. We have to abandon it and engage and halt them on the plains before they reach FOB Warlock and FOB Centurion. Yes, sir, I understand, but it can't be helped. We either lose one or lose all three. We can't deploy in strength before they reach FOB Dingo, and if we try to stop them there, we will be destroyed piecemeal. Yes, sir, I believe we can until reinforcements arrive. Yes, sir, either that or we will die trying. Alpha Epsilon out. D looked around and was visibly relieved to see Stalker. Nice of you to join us, Specialist. You know me, D, I had to finish polishing my boots. Got keep up appearances. The quip brought a chuckle from the assembled men who both Stalker and D had come to know well over the preceding days. What's the game, D? I've just been on the comm 2 Terra Nova 1, commanding officer, Terra Nova Division, and he agrees we have to delay and, if possible, stop the Reds before they get here. They will overrun FOB Dingo, but it can't be helped. We will deploy with everything that can move onto the plains 100 clicks east of here and dig in as tight as a tick. Any idea of the size of the enemy forces? No idea. Lots. Why don't we go see for ourselves? Sounds like a plan, D. Let's get in the field. D immediately attended a meeting with all of the unit commanders and officers present at the base, including those from the Praetorian and Excalibur divisions, and the CEO of the Blue Sabres, who had assumed overall command of the base defense due to the base commander's limited combat experience. While the meeting was taking place, Stalker and the other new Terra Nova men raided the base arsenal and made sure other units did the same. They would need every rocket, missile, grenade, and bullet they could carry in the fight that was coming. They had only 30 minutes before deploying for the front, so they spent it loading supplies into their assigned LTTs. By the time Stalker and the Praetorian and Excalibur men had their LTTs and HTTs crammed full of supplies, many of the green units at the base were only just starting to get organized, so Stalker and the others lent them a hand to get the ball rolling, much to the chagrin of some of the junior officers who only days before had been the superiors to some of the new Terra Nova men, and now found themselves taking orders from them. As much as it has annoyed them, Stalker didn't care. Terra Nova troops, like all other members of the original 10, were classed as separate from the basic military command structure and only answered constitutionally to their own commander, although by convention they came under Stratcom jurisdiction during time of war. The new Terra Nova men also held the rank of Specialist, a rank which was held by every member of the 10, and was the only official rank that was generally used by serving members to address others within the assault divisions, including even the division commanders. All were considered equal within the 10, and serving members followed orders from their unit and battle commanders due to their experience and the mutual respect shared between the elite soldiers, as opposed to the mandatory rules of rank that governed the rest of the UEDF. Promotions were also largely approved from within the divisions by recommendations from other serving commanders. This ensured that truly good leaders, those respected and recommended by other experienced leaders, would lead the division's men in battle. Big D jogged over to Stalker as the meeting broke up. What's the out plan, D? We'll be deploying by air with as many men and as much equipment as we can carry. There won't be time for a second lift before the Reds reach us, so we will be spread pretty thin. We will use the HTTs to give us some light armor support, and we'll have some air cover from the gunships and available F-55s. Everything else, including the Blue Sabres and the bulk of what mechanized and armored forces we can muster from the new and worn-out divisions on site, will make their best possible speed to reinforce our blocking positions. How long before they will arrive at the line of contact and reinforce us, do you think? Your guess is as good as mine. A few hours at least, hopefully before we're overrun. TACCOM has also promised everything they can muster, but most of the combat-ready corps are already on their way to Hellas to start operations there, and it will take time to redirect them. Stalker nodded soberly. The attack on Hellas was supposed to begin within a couple of weeks, and most of the main combat units had already begun to be shipped to new FOBs established closer to the region, which meant TACCOM would be scraping the bottom of the barrel to find units to throw at the sudden crisis in Cydonia. The time was up. If they were to get into position, they had to go now, and all over Warlock and neighboring FOB Centurion men and machines piled into transports already bursting to capacity with supplies and ammunition and slowly lifted off into the dark night. Stalker flicked his vision to NVS and looked over the aerial armada surrounding him, and couldn't help but think that the commander of the 18th Air Cavalry Division that he had met at the Mars Corps base would have been impressed by the mass of flying transports. They flew low so as to avoid detection and were escorted and led by flights of Predator gunships. With a sonic boom and a flash of exhaust, Stalker saw a wing of sleek-looking F-55 Dark Star VSTOL stealth fighters pass overhead and then circle around. It seemed that their air cover had arrived. Indeed, as he continued to watch from the LTT's door, Stalker saw several more wings arrive shortly afterwards, as every available fighter was rushed to cover both the air and ground convoys. It was a half-an-hour-long flight to reach the soon-to-be-established defense line, and TACCOM knew that the UEDF units rushing to it were vulnerable and had launched drones from orbit to recon the route and report any enemy advance forces that might try to intercept them. One of those drones, serial number LX682Z, had picked up movement on its advanced optical sensors. The recon drones used by the UEDF were of an advanced stealth design and didn't use their primary search radars to locate and track airborne targets. Instead, they used highly sensitive optical sensors to pick out and track movement, even in the pitch darkness, and LX682Z was seeing a lot of movement. On one of the command ships in orbit, an intel officer responded to the signals coming from the drone and looked at the footage and data coming in. Within seconds, he was already reaching for a secure link to TACCOM. Stalker was talking to one of the new guys about his combat experience on one of Jupiter's moons, Titan, when the LTT's TACnet crackled to life, and through the front window, Stalker saw the F-55's Flying Combat Air Patrol, or CAP, over the mass of transports accelerate and leave the convoy behind. That can't be a good sign, though, Stalker, and he called out to the LTT's pilot, call sign Drucker. Hey, Drucker, what's going on? We've got red fighters and gunships inbound. They know we're here. Oh, that's just great. Stalker rapidly turned the situation over in his mind. They still had 10 minutes flight time, and then they needed time to deploy and entrench. Not an easy task when you're being attacked by fighters and bloody gunships. 100 clicks further to the east, the thin line of F-55 Dark Stars began to engage the much more numerous Red Legion piloted machines, a mix of older F-50 Moon Blazer and newer F-55 fighters and Predator gunships. As the missiles passed each other in the night sky, the dying began. The stealth capabilities of both sides ensured that initial losses were low, the Red Legion losing several F-50s and gunship, while a few United Earth Air Force, UEF, F-55s also took hits. After expending all of their long-range missiles for minimal result, both sides closed a visual range, and a massive dogfight rapidly developed, with both sides using their advanced aircraft's incredible speed and thrust vector agility to the utmost. Although heavily outnumbered, the UEF pilots knew that they had to buy time for the air and ground convoys to reach the designated line of resistance, and they held the enemy fighters, though often only at the cost of their lives. The night sky becoming filled with explosions, each one marking the loss of aircraft, as pilots on both sides fought and died in the cool night air. Meanwhile, at just above ground level, the Red Legion gunships broke away, dodging the fire directed at them, and left the dogfight far behind as they went seeking easier prey. Stalker's LTT came in at high speed and touched down in the middle of a sloping field just below the crest of a ridge. As he looked out, Stalker saw a huge valley running lengthways spread before him. It was filled with crops and divided by narrow dirt roads, and at one end in the distance was visible the shape of a small hamlet. Stalker was the first one to jump out and touch the ground, dragging boxes of supplies with him as he did. All around him, hundreds more LTTs and HTTs were touching down and spewing forth men, machines, and equipment of all types. Scratch units, consisting of the scattered men of the Terra Nova, Praetorian, and Excalibur divisions, were being dropped lower on the ridge so that they would meet the enemy first. Their positions were being intersected and reinforced by the infantry units, while the mechanized infantry would deploy further up the ridge to provide both overwatch and a second line of resistance if the first was breached. As Stalker looked his LTT finished dropping a cargo, lifted off, and began to pivot in midair to head back to the base, it was at that moment that a missile flashed overhead and hit the LTT dead center. The LTT was torn apart by the impact, and a shower of burning wreckage came crashing to the ground, narrowly missing several of the men it had just dropped, Stalker to having to roll clear to avoid being crushed. Stalker didn't see the missile's source, but several of the escorting gunships did, and they opened fire with their own missiles, and the night sky was suddenly filled with missiles and maneuvering aircraft. Stalker saw several explosions on the horizon, while closer, several more transports and a gunship on the ridge take hits and came crashing down in flames. Further up the ridge, a UEDF gunship rose above the crest and let loose a salvo of 6 missiles before dropping again back into cover, the missiles tearing over Stalker's head by what felt like only by a few meters, and even through his suit he felt the wash from the missile's scramjet engines. Stalker and the other men with him, a mix of Terra Nova and infantry, began to dig in furiously as the air battle raged around and above them. To Stalker's left, a MADV air defense vehicle began to roll off an HTT and immediately launched a pair of SM-8 Standard missiles at some distant enemy. In the same instant, it took a hit from an incoming missile that plowed into the MAD's turret. The air defense tank was still only halfway down the HTT's ramp, and the resulting explosion destroyed not only it but also the HTT and its volatile load of supplies. The massive fireball briefly turned night into day and revealed the picture of thousands of men furiously digging foxholes and setting up weapon emplacements all along the ridgeline. As if besieged by an army of burrowing ants, a line of trenches and foxholes was rapidly appearing along the crop-covered ridgeline. Above Stalker's position, a formation of UEA Predator gunships screamed overhead at low level and peeled off down into the valley below, seeking the enemy. As more MADs began to deploy across the ridge, the rate of enemy missile fire slowed, as the Red Legion gunships were forced to evade the hypervelocity missiles being fired at them. Stalker was more or less oblivious to the air battle overhead as he dug in. Luckily enough, the soil wasn't hard or rocky, and soon the fields on the ridge were lined with foxholes and small walls made up of any loose rocks that could be found. Stalker caught a glimpse of Big D to his left as he stood up in the crop, trying to get a better look at the terrain and the likely path of the enemy's advance, all the meanwhile issuing orders to the men around him. With the air battle over the ridge now almost at a standstill, the hundreds of LTTs and HTTs all along the line began to withdraw, having delivered their cargo. As they left the airspace over the ridgeline, now seemingly belonged to no one, as the remaining gunships of both sides used nearby terrain to try to gain an advantage over their opponents, and the ridge and valley were made into a no-fly zone by the large numbers of MADs and CATs, unmanned portable air defense systems, commonly called manpads, now being deployed by the UEDF forces. All the FOB's air defense assets had been ruthlessly stripped to provide as much cover as possible to the forces in the field. This left the bases virtually defenseless, but there was little choice. Far from the battle lines, stealthy Red Legion crews, missiles launched hours before now, began to arrive in a steady stream at the FOBs to sow destruction with pinpoint accuracy. But they birds had flown the coup, and the missiles impacted largely deserted base facilities. Stalker knew the Red Legion's forward elements couldn't be very far away and made sure that the supplies and ammunition were equally distributed to all the men around him. A number of sandbags and pre-made composite reinforced machine gun nests had also been delivered by the airlift, and Stalker spent the next few minutes making sure they were sighted and concealed as best as was possible on the slope. "Hey, Stalker, you still alive?" It was D on the commnet. "Yeah, I'm here," Stalker said as he shoveled more dirt in front of his foxhole. "What's your status?" "We got hit on landing, but we all made it. Ammo and equipment levels are adequate, and we have good concealment and cover for our positions." "Roger that. TACCOM reports heavy enemy units approaching along a 30-plus click front." possibly 3 to 4 corps of heavy armor with infantry and mechs in support. We have to hold and delay them as long as possible with what we have until we can be reinforced. Stalker paused and took a deep breath while he considered D's words. Stalker knew that D had said them more for the others listening than for him. This isn't going to be an easy night. General de Veers left the meeting room in turmoil, the contesting voices being abruptly cut off as the heavy soundproof doors closed behind him. It has been a colossal failure of intelligence, his failure. That much could not be denied. The Red Legion build-up in Cydonia and subsequent assault had achieved complete tactical surprise. De Veers did not let his anger show outwardly, but beneath the surface he was seething. His son strode alongside him as he walked, anger increasing his already normal brisk pace. Once he was sure they were beyond any prying eyes, De Veers spoke in a low voice. "Well, Atlas, do you have anything to say?" The young man's face remained neutral, his voice an expressionless monotone. "No excuse, sir. I oversaw the latest batch of reports myself. There is nothing to suggest a move in the Sidonian AO." De Veers grunted in a rare moment of overt frustration at his son's reply. That Atlas was his son was clear. He hid his emotions well. De Veers glanced at his son's name badge, the letters Heerden standing out in gold letters. Atlas had chosen to keep his late mother's name. De Veers wondered if his son had made the choice out of love for his mother or as a gentle reminder to his father that he still considered him partly responsible for her early death, a strike at the premature age of 51. "So be it," said De Veers, putting thoughts of his wife aside. "I will look into the matter myself. Someone made a mistake. It will not happen again." Atlas watched his father carefully. He knew his father would eventually discover that it had been him, his own son, who had systematically concealed any evidence of the upcoming Red Legion move in Cydonia that came through the intelligence branch network. When that happened, Atlas's carefully hidden secrets would be unmasked. Nothing could change that now. Now that the moment was nearly at hand, Atlas didn't feel trepidation. Instead, only a mild sense of relief, like a weight slowly lifting. Everything was in place. Along the line of resistance, they now had scattered elements from the Terra Nova, Excalibur, and Praetorian divisions, including the new recruits and green infantry units from several newly arrived infantry divisions, with some light armor in support. Combined with this, there were also mixed mechanized units formed from several worn-out divisions, while others that had been quickly thrown together were still on the way to the ridgeline. When combined with the Blue Sabers, these forces represented the full strength of the defense. It's not much of a force to hold off Red Legion forces that could number 500,000 men, Stalker thought. An estimated 4 heavy corps of fresh troops. We're all going to die. Stalker snapped out of his mental gymnastics. "We're all set here, D. We'll give them hell. Bravo Epsilon out." Stalker glanced around his foxhole. There were a dozen or so magazines for his impulse rifle, 3 for his M503, a pack of 10 frag grenades, 2 slap anti-tank rockets, and a lucky find of 6 50mm heat grenades for his M503. Well, Stalker thought, at least with this lot I'll be able to take a few of those red bastards with me before I go. The relative silence on the ridge was abruptly shattered as the air was suddenly torn by the screaming roar of artillery. Incoming. Stalker dived into his shallow foxhole, but was greeted not with the ground-shaking thud of explosive rounds, but with a dull pop and a hiss. Stalker stuck his head up and saw the green hue of his vision beginning to get clouded. Stalker cursed under his breath. The Reds were using multispectral smoke rounds to blind the defending forces, and soon the whole ridge began to become blanketed with a dense cloud of impenetrable smoke. Stalker turned his NVS off, switching to standard light intensification mode. Good old human sight was better in this situation. There was little breeze, and annoyingly the smoke hung in the air like fog. Stalker waited. Soon in the distance he heard the sound of a vehicle engine somewhere in the darkness. It grew gradually closer, sounding like it was off to his right. After a moment, there was a muffled explosion followed by an intense burst of small arms fire, followed again by silence. Stalker heard another vehicle, closer this time, and he waited patiently for it to show itself. Slowly out of the darkness and smoke emerged the shape of a vehicle. It looked like a Weasel 4x4 armored scout vehicle. Its 90mm gun turret sweeping back and forth looking for the enemy as it probed forward. Stalker waited until it was close, and then with a low pop fired a 50mm heat grenade, the round impacting with a bright flash, punching a hole through the lightly armored scout vehicle's front hull. Stalker opened up with his impulse rifle, peppering the vehicle. To his left and right, other men in his impromptu unit also opened fire. The Weasel rolled to a halt, smoke coming from the hole, its engine stalling. The vehicle commander popped out of the top hatch and was immediately hit, falling back inside. Stalker jumped up from his foxhole and, keeping low, ran to the Weasel, pulling a grenade from a clip on his waist as he moved. Jumping up on the front of the scout vehicle, he threw the grenade in the open hatch and dived off, the grenade detonating just as he picked himself up. With smoke now issuing from the vehicle's open hatch, silence once again returned to the battlefield. They were just probing the defenses. Stalker knew, no doubt, the first wave of the enemy main body wouldn't be far behind. Despite being initially surprised by the lack of artillery fire, Stalker realized that the enemy's main objective was obviously the FOBs and their supplies. This meant that the Reds would be reluctant to stop long enough to organize full artillery support. Time was critical to the enemy. They had to take the ground and destroy as much men and equipment as possible before the UEDF could react. And setting up an artillery bombardment took time, and the mobile self-propelled guns also had a limited supply of ammunition. As he sat waiting, shrouded in smoke, Stalker could hear the grumble of vehicle engines growing louder, the number of the engines too many to count. Stalker also noticed a picking up of the notoriously fickle Martian winds, and the hence immobile screen of IR smoke began to shift. Things were about to heat up. The dawn was fast approaching, and to the rear of the ridge there was a glow on the horizon from the still, invisible sun. Slowly the valley became visible as the smoke cleared, and the sight that met the defenders' eyes was both breathtaking and horrifying in the same instant. The valley was filled with a mass of red painted vehicles. At a glance they appeared as one solid mass, but a closer inspection revealed individual formations, visible amongst the seemingly single horde. Stalker took a deep breath. This was just the first wave. There were vehicles for as far he could see, thousands of every type: tanks, IFVs, APCs, air defense vehicles, and SP artillery. But strangely, Stalker saw no sign of mechs. Now where are they hiding? His thoughts were broken by the nearby whoosh of a missile launch, as all along the ridge missiles were fired by missile-armed infantry and vehicles. The missiles lanced out, and in the enemy's front ranks vehicles began to swerve, and the popping of self-defense systems could be heard over the sound of the engines. But some of the missiles got through to their targets, and all along the line fireballs and pillars of rising black smoke marked hits. The Red Legion armor quickly began to return fire with equal gusto, and the last remnants of darkness were lit up by crisscrossing missiles, the flashes of tank cannons, the twin streaks of plasma fire, and countless tracer rounds of every conceivable type.